again, Jo here. So today we are having a look at The Dodo Made Me Do It, which is another of my stories. This one came out in 2018 as well. It's about a child called Danny. Every year in the summer holidays he has to go and stay with his granny up in Scotland in some mad little tiny village in the middle of nowhere. And he never wants to go because he thinks it's really boring. His parents always have to work, so it's just how it is, but he hates it. And every year he kind of wishes something exciting would happen. So while he's there this year, he hears that there was a shipwreck many years ago on a tiny little island just off the coast. Now he can't swim, but he'd love to get over there and find treasure. And then he could use the treasure to buy an amazing summer holiday for him and his mum and dad and escape Scotland. But then he finds out that there's going to be a super low tide, and he hatches a plan to basically just wade out to the island and see what's on there. Hopefully treasure, find the treasure, bring it back, wade back, and then he's out of Scotland and on to better things. So this is a description in the story of what happens. Here we go. So, by the evening, the sky was clear and the moon was full. Danny snuck out of the house and ran to Clootie Bay. The tide was definitely really low, but the shipwreck island still looked worryingly far off. Danny was determined, though. He turned on his torch, held it above his head and began wading out. Within a few steps, the water was lapping over the top of his wellies, weighing his feet down. He carried on. The water was getting deeper, up to his thighs now, and now his belt, and now nipping at his ribs. Don't panic, thought Danny. Don't think about the fact that you can't swim. Keep going. Think about the treasure. He pushed forward through the chilly water. Did something just brush past his belly below the surface? Danny gasped in shock. He began to run now, only the water pulled him back and slowed him down. On he went through the waves, imagining huge fish and giant sea snakes with sharp teeth swirling around him. When suddenly the water level dropped. It was below his ribs, then below his belly button. He had passed the deepest point. As the sea became shallower, Danny took bigger and bigger strides, the water dragging at his long legs, until he finally tumbled free of its liquid grip and fell down, exhausted, on the shore. He'd done it. He lay there, panting, staring up. A plane blinked its way across the sky. "Flight MRU 396 to Mauritius," Danny whispered. It was famous in Canusie for being the only plane that ever flew over the village. It could be seen at the same time every night, just before 10 p.m. "So that means I have about 10 minutes to explore before the tide cuts me off," Danny said. Somehow speaking out loud gave him courage. He was shaking with cold. Wow, having an adventure was kind of nerve-wracking. His trembling fingers set the timer on his watch, and then he began to climb up onto the island. Danny's torch picked out its way through steep rocks towards a grassy summit. He was looking for a glint, a sparkle, anything that suggested treasure. Gold would be nice. Jewels would be exciting. A handful of diamonds? A fat emerald? He searched the grass but found nothing, then carefully began picking his way down the far side of the island, hopping between rocks, hearing the water lapping deep below. Eventually he came to another small beach which faced out to the open ocean and began scanning the sand for treasure. Still nothing. Not even washed up timber or sea-ripped rigging. Nothing to hint at a shipwreck. Perhaps Susie, that's his friend, was right. It had all been washed away by now. It had been years ago after all. He checked his watch. 3 minutes left until he had to leave. No, there had to be treasure here. He didn't want his dream of an adventure to be over yet. Danny moved further up the small beach, then spotted a low cave at the end. He edged nearer, then stopped. There were prints in the sand leading into the cave. He shone the torch on them. They were a bird's footprints. The hairs on Danny's neck prickled a little. These prints were huge. Perhaps from a seagull? No, they weren't webbed like a seabird's feet. Maybe an eagle on the beach? That didn't feel right. Maybe... Squawk! Danny froze. So, it's not too much of a spoiler to tell you that what Danny actually finds is a dodo. And this is so exciting. And he decides he wants to bring it back to the mainland, back to his home, and it will be his pet, and it will make the summer exciting for him. What an amazing pet. So he goes with his friend Susie the next day in a boat, and they bring the dodo back. But what turns out is that the dodo doesn't really want to be a pet. Dodos aren't really pets, and it's noisy, and it's attracting attention, the wrong kind of attention. And Danny doesn't know what to do with it, and he's very stressed until finally he works out what the dodo actually wants, which is exactly the same as what he wants, to go home. And then the adventure really, really starts. So I got the idea for this story partly on a summer holiday to Scotland that I went on with my family, and we stayed in a house and you could walk to the beach, and there was a tiny island just offshore, really not that far away. And it gave me the idea. And so that's something you can do when you're coming up with your stories, is just use things that have happened to you, use things from your own life and your own experiences, draw on them, and they can become the setting or the characters or even the storyline for the story that you come up with. So again, I'm handing over to Rachel and Fran now while you guys get busy with them on activities about the book, and then I'll see you again tomorrow. I'm going to talk about my latest book, which has only just come out, called I Stole My Genius Sister's Brain. See you tomorrow.